I either have or will cover other parts of this franchise, and this video either is or will be linked below. I'm not going to restate here what I did or will say in the other video. These videos get long enough as it is. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. The Simpsons series review, starting with plot. In the American suburb of Springfield, in an unnamed, probably fictional state, not Grace, all-American Simpson family and others try to get through life despite their numerous substantial troubles in those efforts. On plot, I have not read any of Life in H-Word. My libraries don't have them. I've watched some of the show past season 7, but this is where I chose to cut it off, which is something I meant to say in the opening there. But anyway, it'll be in the title of the video, unless I forget that too. Season 7 is the last full season that remains great. Season 1 is good to great, and seasons 2 through 7 are great. There are almost no episodes. On this most recent viewing, I have come to realize that there are just a couple of episodes that aren't, but after season 7 is where it really starts. But yes, there is some good in season 8. Now, I've only watched the special features on the DVDs for these 7 seasons, not the original shorts, no reading, nothing else. And it's been ages since I watched any Simpsons episode that wasn't in the first 7 seasons. I'm reviewing the show as if the first 7 seasons are all that exists. I will barely at all be talking about the show past season 7. Now, to get into characters, starting with the regulars, Homer Simpson. Homer is a pretty average adult American man, father of 3, doesn't earn a ton of money. Where he's different is that he works in the nuclear power plant, and this may help put the nuclear in a nuclear family. And beyond being a schlub, a drunk, who spends too much money and hopes, sometimes expects, to strike it rich quickly and or suddenly, of course when he does, he spends it all so the episode can end with the status quo intact again, as the format demands, and they sometimes poke fun at. And on that one, he is not alone in the show. Sometimes they do change the status quo with things that carry over to any and all later episodes. And a lot of these things end up in the background, barely referred to. But yeah, pretty overweight due to his weakness for all foodstuffs bad for him, including fatty foods, snacks, and horse doovers. He reeks, he's quite a moron. He does unbelievably stupid things with little regard for the consequences. Of course, comedically, there often aren't any, or at least many. And before you ask, yes, I know they went meta with this in season 8, episode 23, Homer's Enemy. Interesting episode. A lot of the best comedy about him comes from that, but he is also genuinely sweet, nice, and caring, and he loves his family, especially Marge. His love of her is established early in the first aired episode, the Christmas special, and is reaffirmed several times in the first season. It's the main focus in a number of episodes, and sometimes, when it matters the most, he really does come through for them. and sometimes the stupid he does is in spite of, but other times it's because of it. It's not that he doesn't care about how they feel, it's that he doesn't think he can do better. He doesn't realize how bad he's being. In general, sometimes doesn't realize how much something about him is bothering others. He does have a terrible violent temper, even strangling Bart, but it's cartoony and over the top. You can't really take it seriously. It's not advocating child abuse. Matt Groening made the rule that it would always be spur of the moment, not sustained, and if possible, Bart strangles him back, resists well, or the like. And just in general, his temper is volatile. He'll go from being happy to furious to sad, back to happy in moments. If he's angry, others being happy will sometimes anger him more, even if they're trying to help him, especially if it's his neighbor, Ned Flanders. Sometimes incredibly easy to cheer up and endlessly optimistic. He spends a lot of time sobbing, often happy, optimistic, will cheer, chant, and woohoo almost anything at the right time. Lazy, bad father, loves TV, snacks, and football, both watching and betting on. Makes up Bible quotes to give his will more weight. He thinks he has great wisdom to impart to his children, sometimes that he knows and understands things better than Marge and such. Acts like he's the man of the house, but seldom it's him having the stronger will, much less the better idea. It's that he whines until Marge gives in. Sometimes really effeminate, giddy, giggling. His favorite jukebox record at the bar is It's Raining Men. He sings girly pop songs like Girls Just Want to Have Fun, sometimes a cappella. When Bart suggests the kids give him a makeover, make him Homina, his first reaction is, "It would be delightful." He does reject it moments later, but just for a second there, yeah. Compulsively steals what he can get away with sometimes, including things he has no use for, and aren't even of that high quality. When in one episode the neighbors are moving out, and when he finds that in the process of moving out, they have put outside in cardboard boxes, currently completely unguarded, coat hangers and pills that he has no need for, he completely loses it and immediately tries to steal it. And not long after, Marge tries to talk him out of it, and he insists that maybe he's not getting enough estrogen. He reads off the label. Yeah. He is at times the surrogate for the audience, the typical American, letting them explore those values, experiences, and such. And ultimately, the show is primarily about him, the way South Park is mostly about Stan. And there's some inspiration from Fred Flintstone, dumb schmuck with attractive wife and vices. He likes to bowl and struggles to do well in the world, a stupid friend named Barney. And the opening to every episode is a lot like the Flintstone one, with quitting time, Homer leaving, using the car to get home, where him entering encounters some problem and he shouts. He and the rest of the family try to be normal and fail like we do. He cries and is in his underpants more often than any other leading man. He can be conservative in his politics in spite of empathy. He just likes their political ideas because he doesn't realize how damaging and nonsensical they are. So, typical conservative order there, when he does vote. And the voice started out as an impersonation of Walter Matthau, but fairly early grew from that. Marge Simpson. Marge is Homer's wife. She sometimes gets politically active, protesting and campaigning, very feminist. Again, at times. She was more ready to take stances when she was in high school. She loves her family, patient with them, but also does demand they put in effort. Tries to instill good values in the children, homemaker and great at it. Worrywart, murmurs worriedly. Sometimes Lisa will do so in tune with her. Naive, but not typically stupid, at least not as much as Homer and Bart. and her tall hair will hit the frame when she walks through a door. It'll droop when she's sad. It'll rub against the ceiling when she walks into a room, etc. She and Homer will talk over problems such as financial ones in bed. And like Homer, to their kids, decidedly uncool. And where a ton of sitcom married couples, maybe especially before this, had the two not even like each other much, Marge loves Homer and is very sexually attracted to him as he is to her. Bart Simpson, 10-year-old brat in acts and in anagram of his name, troublemaker, underachieving, proud of it, kinda stupid but creative and clever when he applies himself, which is of course often in pranks and the like. Absolutely terrible at hiding that it's him who did the bad thing. He's been known to take pictures of himself doing the bad thing just for seemingly no other reason than incriminating himself. No matter how much he applies to himself when it comes to skills, study, knowledge, stuff that's important, he just cannot do well. Loves Krusty the Clown, whose design is Homer in clown makeup, thus he disrespects his father at every turn while worshipping a clown who looks almost exactly the same. Also loves the ultra-violent Tom and Jerry parody, Itchy and Scratchy cartoons, which most characters seem to love despite the tone. Comic books, especially Radioactive Man. And Bart is one of the most popular characters and the mascot of the show. And when Homer says his name angrily, it sounds like he's barking. He does really creative anagrams and such. Cod fish platter becomes cold pet rat. Enjoy our party snacks becomes boy our party sucks. Yeah, that one they had. It's a little less. But the reason he makes it work is that in that case it's spelled out in, what do you call them, little finger sandwiches. So he eats some of them and reorganizes a few others. He crank calls Moe the bartender, having him call out fake names like My Crotch, Amanda Hug and Kiss. Lisa often laughs along with Bart at these, though he's usually the one giving the name. In general, sometimes she really gets into his pranks. And after a few of those, the writer stopped doing them because they were so difficult to write. And same goes for some other types of gags. And he and Lisa will do the "Are we there yet?" thing over and over with different things, not just that one, and in a number of different situations, and usually, eventually, Homer will cave when it's something specific they're asking for. He uses a slingshot, a skateboard, rather well. He has these wild imaginative dreams, fantasies, nightmares, and the like, very true to a 10-year-old boy's mind. When he can, he ends up in historical vehicles, pretending to be using them, often in the wrong way. He pretends that the spirit of St. Louis is a fighter plane engaged in, like, what appears to be dogfights. That kind of dogfight. And he sometimes finds cool stuff inside of these vehicles. Lisa Simpson, 8-year-old, incredibly smart, sensitive, and as the middle child, completely overlooked. Her genius doesn't go unnoticed by her parents, but they have no idea how to help her develop it. The smarter she got, the sadder she got, and her developments are very similar to that of those of voice actress Yardley Smith. Musical prodigy at the saxophone, which she uses to express her frequent sadness, with blues music, some of it which she writes herself. Sometimes really bad at sports and other practical stuff. Occasionally an uncontrollable brat, especially early on before they were certain what characters' identities were, and they were finding them, feeling them out. Has almost no friends, especially real friends. Into some girly stuff, and is in love with all 8 Coreys. Also loves Krusty, Itchy and Scratchy. Matt Groening has said that she's the one character not completely ruled by her impulses and that's why she's so often in pain. She's really underrated, or was for some time. She's gotten more recognized. She's my personal favorite character. If not for her, I would have been much less passionate about this show. Maggie Simpson. The baby of the family, sucks her pacifier a lot. Almost never cries. Sweet and helpful, gladly offering her pacifier to animals and such. Clearly has some idea of what's going on at times. Maggie manages to get out of her crib when she really needs to. She crawls, she tries to walk, but then falls over repeatedly and is often not watched or otherwise neglected to the point where she almost drinks glue, falls far, or even escapes the house. And also implied at times to be really, really smart. Major guests. Homer's widowed father, Abe Grandpa Simpson, a bitter old man who's senile with his ideas of various things, including diseases stuck upwards of a century back in time. He goes on endless nonsensical rants, urges violence against certain people when the mob has turned against them. His false teeth get in trouble a lot. And there's Marge's unmarried twin sisters, Patty and Selma Bouvier, who suck the joy out of every word they speak. They work at the DMV, taking out their frustrations with life on anyone dealing with their driver's license, and this asks the question, are angry and bitter people attracted to the DMV, or does the DMV make positive-minded people angry and bitter? And it answers. In every flashback, we see that they were always angry and bitter. And they actually started smoking at an alarmingly early age, which somehow got past their parents. But then the parents of both Patty, Selma, and Marge clearly also had issues. And the mother is still alive, so she still has issues. Montgomery Monty Burns, Homer's boss, he is a Bond villain, basically. They don't always play that up, but that is what he is. And sometimes they really let him be just that. He's maniacal, complete with the laughter, filthy rich, cruel, fires people for fun. His head looks very much like that of a vulture, and that's entirely intentional. He runs the nuclear power plant, which is ridiculously unsafe, with glowing uranium and plutonium spilling everywhere, mutated fish in the water nearby, rats that are often translucent and or there in the dozens, vultures heard flying overhead in the establishing shot. He's stuck decades ago expecting things to still be like that, similar to Grandpa, but he has way too much power for someone who's still stuck that far back. Waylon Smithers, the personal assistant to Burns himself. He's in love with Burns and thus the butt of countless gay jokes. He does everything for him, even though Burns throws him under a bus at the slightest sign of weakness on Waylon's part. Moe Sislak. He runs Moe's Tavern, the local bar. Homer's one of his regulars. Ugly, nasty, hateful, absurdly cheap, extremely quick to violence, albeit usually he doesn't follow through on it, at least on screen. Abu Nahasapima Petilan. It is spelled exactly how it sounds. He runs the local Quickie Mart convenience store, a swinging bachelor, always getting robbed and shot. Barney Gumble, also extremely, like, he literally says at one point he charges whatever he wants for his items. Barney Gumble, Homer's drinking buddy, huge alcoholic, pathetic, belches almost as frequently as he speaks, and frequently suddenly mid-sentence, even mid-word. It blows a lot of air. It's been known to cause avalanches. A la Cheers' Norm, Barney has a comically huge tab. and when sober, actually extremely smart and capable. He just almost never is sober. Milhouse Van Houten, Bart's best friend, whom he shamelessly exploits over and over. Very smart, a nerd, sweet and good-natured, although sometimes loves pranks, and is impressed by Bart's skill at them. Mayor Joe Quimby, Kennedy, basically, obsessed with sex, especially with his young assistants, though he's married, often incompetent, as the people in the city generally are. Ned Flanders, Homer's, the Simpsons family next door neighbor, annoyingly perfect like the rest of his family. His sweet wife, Maud, his perpetually well-behaved sons, Rod and Todd, he's always talking Christianity. Wiggum, the chief of police, the rare Springfielder stupider than Homer. Lenny and Carl, co-workers of Homer, stupid and lazy as he is. Mrs. Krabappel, Bart's teacher, frustrated with him, the other students, and life in general, hates her awful ex. Comic book guy who's overweight and nerdy. Dr. Hibbert, the Simpsons family physician for the decade Bart's existed, of residents in town, possibly the one most full of inner rage. He chuckles at serious subjects, start and end of every sentence to deal with it. It's tough being a smart person in Springfield. Krusty the Clown, who either really hates or really loves clowning, mostly hates, sometimes amazing at it and puts in a ton of effort. His real persona is a horrible role model and just person in general. Gambling, swearing, takes the kids to Tijuana for a good time. Lots of terrible ideas when he expands his business, dangerous merchandise, huge public fails, such as reading cue cards, showing up last minute to host things, etc. His show has run for decades, changed format several times, and you'll see episodes recorded on historically significant dates. Mostly old episodes of the show are terrible, even he himself will admit it. At times does stand-up, acts and stage plays and the like. There too he wears the clown makeup. Eleanor, we've got to do something about this depression. And is there something on my face? And he is also usually absolutely terrible at those. Fat Tony, the mob boss, Principal Skinner, incredibly boring in all respects, except for when he remembers his former Green Beret abilities, where he's then badass. A Vietnam vet, he suffers flashbacks. Either way, always trying to fix students who don't do well, including accidentally meeting them in a real-life situation years after they left school. Cut school funding like there's no tomorrow. Professor John Frink, scientist and inventor, parody of Jerry Lew's Nutty Professor. His genius science is always intended for good, but always turns evil. Robots that try to kill, death rays that he hadn't realized would only be used for evil, etc. Lionel Hutz, the slimy defense lawyer, literal ambulance chaser, absolutely terrible at his job, voiced by the late great Phil Hartman. Troy McClure, washed-up 70s actor, you may remember him from such roles as always upbeat in roles, in films, ads, etc. Also voiced by the late great Phil Hartman. Reverend Timothy Lovejoy, local church reverend, vacillates between hugely Christian and pretending to be just using religion as an excuse to argue for what he wants to. His wife Helen is the #1 gossip in town. Dr. Nick Riviera, an inexpensive, incompetent doctor, very happy to lie. Santa's little helper, the family dog, awful, lazy, stupid, can't do tricks, but seldom angry and violent. Groundskeeper Willie, outrageously Scottish, accent, eagerly wears a kilt, serves haggis. Somehow does all the groundskeeper jobs in town. Similarly, Automan the loser, rock music loving school bus driver, seems to drive every single bus in town. He's very happy with his place in life. He drives the school bus, sleeps on the couch of his brother who's married to his ex-girlfriend and such. And self-important Kent Brockman, anchor, hosts every news, debate, and such show in town. School bullies Nelson Muntz, Kearney Ziswick, Jimbo Jones, and Dolph. McBain, real name Rainier Wolfcastle, they had to use that for a while since the movie using the name McBain came out. A parody of Schwarzenegger and his roles in films like Commando, thick Austrian accent, dumb, a hack, star of overblown Bay action flicks. And there's basically a Simpsons character counterpart to anyone you meet in person. Well, the show does not have that many teenagers, but otherwise. No one ages. When it's set, does keep up fit with when it's aired, mostly. Adults often clearly don't care at all about what could happen to their children or otherwise the defenseless. Distinct character designs, you can recognize them at a glance or recognize them just by their silhouette. Most characters are stupid and bad at their job or doing something bad at their job. There are just degrees to it. The more power a character has, the stupider they will be. Just like in real life, one of the creators added. Many characters look absurdly close to the appearance of their relatives. This is especially true of Milhouse, whose mother looks like if Milhouse was taller and in a dress, and his father, who looks exactly like Milhouse but has less hair. And the mother of, I forget if it's the father or the mother, who looks like an older version of his mother. And characters will do the thing that is really obviously stupid, wrong, worse, the worst of the options, etc. 40 or 50 speaking parts in some episodes. And sometimes gets big names within different fields. Sometimes they play themselves, other times characters. Other than actors, the people working on the show will sometimes make cameo appearances, usually only visually drawn. And sometimes the actors sound and act a lot like their characters while performing, which is either creepy or cute. I can't quite. It's a little of column A, a little of column B. And yes, it is pretty funny to watch the 97 Godzilla, which has several actors from this, and they do at least some of the voices and or lines that sound just like some of their characters on this show, and they actually play characters that are similar in some cases. Harry Shearer literally does, he basically does play Kent Brockman in that movie. And, Hank Azaria does the, oh geez, just like Moe, and yeah. The main cast are all highly talented and give great performances for their characters. Style. Sometimes, maybe especially early on, the continuity is terrible. One episode will state that Marge is an amazing cook, and then a few later she's microwaving meatloaf. An episode will make a joke or the like, and a little further down, half a dozen episodes, they do a whole episode based on that joke, which is a pretty decent way to do, yeah. Going between genres in scenes, sometimes several in the same scene. And I'd say this is one of the first cases of that. That's in a lot of shows now, maybe especially animated. I don't watch that many animated shows. And I think this was one of the first cases to really do that. And I definitely say the people on the commentary tracks on the DVDs definitely think that they are. And after season 7, the pacing got to try to be too quick, trying to cram in 2 or 3 punchlines for each bit. It just wasn't as funny. They tried to fill it with gross-out material, humiliation, and pain for characters. Before those seasons, that stuff is more tempered with material that isn't like that. There is, there are times where they try to squeeze a lot of material out of a single bit, or gross out comedy, humiliation, and pain for characters, but it's much, much less, and it tends to be surrounded by material that isn't like that, so yeah. And they have an annual Halloween special episode with 3 stories fit into the length of 1 regular episode. And as it should be, it's scary, fast, funny, and memorable. And Season 1 does not have one of those, but otherwise, yeah. And the family will take a trip to a major location. Of course, if it's located outside of the US or sometimes within Cajun controversy. It's ignorant and kind of ugly and not necessarily even funny. And this especially got bad after the first 7 seasons. Now, tried to be and succeeded in being a huge step up for TV animation, weekly new animated material, no repeating backgrounds, no shortcuts in animation or elsewhere, 45 minutes of material compressed into 20 minutes, complicated ideas, animation, and writing. A conflict, even the main one, may be resolved quickly and or easily at the end of an episode, or not at all. A few episodes will focus on characters that would otherwise get ignored, including Marge, Lisa, even Maggie, and less major characters. The plot or otherwise show may suddenly be interrupted by another film medium story that's happening concurrently. Burns and Homer are talking about the latter needing to go to college, and once the conversation is over, Burns suddenly says he has to find the jade monkey before the next full moon. Of course, when South Park started doing that same thing, they did it infinitely better by really taking it and running with it, legitimately letting the other story take over the episode, or at least the A or B story part of it, rather than leaving it as a throwaway gag. But I've said a lot of positive things about South Park that where it's better than The Simpsons, and I stand by them all. But something I'm not sure I have really given Simpsons enough credit for is that being, if The Simpsons had tried to do that, and also South Park didn't do it right away, it would not have worked. It is definitely, when you compare early Simpsons to early South Park, you have to remember early Simpsons, we're talking 89, early South Park 97. So, but South Park did take over for quality. I've watched almost every single South Park episode, and there are almost no bad ones in the entire run. In 97, Simpsons were a few seasons into their, downward spiral, and South Park hit the ground running. Now, since it's animated, they can show the stuff on TV the characters watch, and show that the Smurfs were horribly animated. They do parodies on ads, TV shows, and such. Characters will say exactly what they or someone else is doing. Doctor, is it too early for me to mother him unbearably? Hilarious parodies of musical theater with translations into musical classic dramatic films and plays such as A Streetcar Named Desire and Planet of the Apes. They make comical the dramatic moments, maybe get the whole point of the original story wrong and such, and it's you get the sense that maybe, just maybe, some things should not be put in big plays, yeah, or at least not into musical theater. I can't see the harm, and then we, the audience, see the harm. Characters treat each other badly, intentionally sometimes, always tries to subvert expectations, and a lot of the way succeeds. There's always a reporter close by, a photo will be snapped and instantly make headlines. Comedy. Cleverness, silliness, parodies, references, verbal, gross out, etc. With some exceptions, not cartoon physics, cartoon sound effects and such. When characters get hurt, they stay hurt, you can tell they're hurt. Things that can't happen in real life don't particularly happen on the show. They just go right up to the edge of what could happen sometimes. They call it flexible reality, or rubber band reality. Often, for just a tiny bit of an episode, something will be just barely credible, but not any entire non-Halloween episode Dadaism. It'll be a disaster movie, an action flick with a deadly threat to the world, or the like, for seconds, and then that isn't referenced since. And the creators clearly love animation and will, in extremes, imagine scenarios and such, go beyond reality. Town geography is all over the place. But animals behave like animals, humans like humans. There's almost never a case of a human making an animal sound to show that they are furious, for example, or an animal, yeah, doing something very human. But occasionally. At times, they will show something that looks like cartoon physics, then reveal there's a realistic explanation, such as steam out the ears, 2 kettles were on behind him, hats fly upwards, broken AC. Sometimes a seemingly tiny event will have huge consequences. Stylized character designs, bulgy eyes, overbites, no chins. I wonder what Caldwell Tanner would look like as a Simpsons character. Yellow skin tones so that the first time someone catches an episode they would think the color was off on the TV. Matt Groening had as a goal that everyone in Springfield is cynical in how they react to even death and the like. Everyone on the show is a huge jerk, but it does have heart, at least a lot of the time. And the people of Springfield are also incredibly easily led, mob mentality. Uses tropes in cinematic shorthand, but also comments on them, mocks them, uses them for jokes. Homer is driving late at night. Sleepily he claims, "I'm not tired. I'm not tired at all." Then we see what appears to be their car crashing violently. Cut to a broader shot of that, we see Bart looking on from a hotel that they clearly checked into and stating, "Phew, glad that wasn't us." We assumed it was them because the 2 shots go together. But the car we see crash, we hadn't seen them in. We hear a letter read inside the head of Homer as he reads it, in the voice of the writer, and then it turns out he actually was standing there saying it as Homer read it. Sometimes a montage was actually only the couple of things we saw, or in real time, rather than there being a lot we assumed from what we did see. They didn't start chasing us until you turned on that chasing music. Turns it off, chase ceases. So the chase and music fitting it do require one another. And they make it a point to note whether or not the music can be heard by the characters in the scene, and if, you know, if the music in the scene... There are several times where we literally see someone put on music before we, the listener, we, the viewer, hear the music, so that we know for a fact, yes, the characters are also hearing it. It is, what is the word? Diegetic, I think. Dramatic music for a revelation, and then the character goes to the camera goes to the wrong thing. Terrible plans work out. People don't plan when they should. A character will actually say what they are doing when you wouldn't expect them to. Things work out perfectly in spite of everything seeming like they won't, or go wrong in spite of everything going right. Good news taken poorly, bad news taken too well. Over and under reactions in general. People do a simple to-do thing in a way that is overly complicated, or vice versa. And the comedy standby of the dramatic turns out to be mundane, or vice versa. Every character has 4 fingers on each hand, so counting to 5 takes 2 hands. A character will say or do something, and then completely change their emotional state and walk off or change what they're doing. Cutaway gags, fantasy sequences. Loves to stick the knife in and twist the blade sometimes. At least I have X, and then he loses X. And episodes set at Christmas, Valentine's Day and such may celebrate it, but it'll definitely go very negative with the humor, such as no presents this Christmas, or, you know, the person you thought you loved and would be with can't stand you. So, like real life in that. Except for household pets, and sometimes with them too. Trying to get animals to perform will get you attacked by them. And the characters, nobody learns, improves, or betters themselves. Episodes go through dozens of table reads and such, and some jokes are removed or changed if they eventually stop being funny. This leads to some great jokes being lost and some bad and strange jokes left in the episode, which is the result of reworking one or more jokes based on things that the viewers don't know, or things that end up cut. Comedy details. Old people are, Matt Groening likes to vent about old people, and yeah, it's one of their main targets, and they claim at one point that no old people watch the show, so they can take shots at them. And I mentioned earlier that the show is basically set when an episode airs, or originally aired, rather. There are some really out-of-date traits, such as a newspaper boy, the long show intro. Characters do things that the writers did as kids. And, excuse me, it's one of those cases of the 80s or 90s sitcom where they're bad examples. This is a family you're glad you're not, that isn't yours. A family people you're relieved you aren't. And similar to other late 80s, early 90s sitcoms, and I already said that, yeah. Don't do what Bart and Homer does, same as for Cartman and Garrison. And when the show does stories about love, my ex-fiance and I joke that Matt Groening and Weird Al Yankovic must have dated the same girls. They both write snarky comedy about love that go incredibly painful, sometimes even tragic, but some do end sweetly, or at least not horribly, for the people in love. And some really sweet romantic love stories, they ring true, though some feel hokey, cheesy, or corny. And the creators have talked about, they try not to be cheesy for very long in a row, and maybe only around really dark stuff and such. No matter how sexy the character is supposed to be, Matt Groening didn't want it to look like it was drawn by a horny animator like, say, Frank Miller's Women. He almost always got his way. And when it comes to religion, the Simpsons go to church every week, not meaning that it's seen in every episode, and their relationship with religion is explored, and the god religion is very Old Testament, punishing God who grants miracles, answers prayers. And it has fun with religion, mocks it sometimes, but also shows in sincerity, not insincerely, the good elements, in fairness. But that does tend to focus on Christianity. Homer will say grace before dinner, often telling God how awful his family is, or how safe nuclear power is. I don't think he ever gets through grace without ranting at all, and usually it's about how awful his family is. Politically, it's sometimes on one side, sometimes on the other of the aisle. Sometimes it leans right, other times it leans Republican. And it is far less political than South Park. And ending with my political comments. And this is where you may want to turn off the video if you don't want to hear stuff like that. In spite of being kind of a schlub, Homer's married to a beautiful, smart woman who loves him, because for all the tropes this mocks, it does live down to that one. Oh, but he loves her. Yes, so do tons of the other sitcom leading men in this kind of relationship. The idea being that as long as you're in love with her, you can get and stay with a woman whose needs you can't meet, and who gives you far more than you give her. Other than homophobia and occasional transphobia, there's not very much of the kind of 90s kicking down in these 7 seasons. I've reviewed other parts of this franchise. The links are in the description box. Please comment, thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.